How much does the UN cost? It costs about $3 billion to run the United Nations, and that's roughly 1/10 of the cost of the global market for potato chips. When you divide that amongst the 8 billion people of the world, you have a cost of a little bit less than 40 cents per person per year that the UN operates. And if you add up all of those expenses, regular budget and peacekeeping together, the annual cost on average for every person on the world is about $1.25 per person. So it's about as much as, say, a bag of chips, although chips are actually slightly more expensive than that and slightly worse for you. Where does the United Nations get its money? The United Nations gets its money basically from all of the countries. There's 193 countries in the United Nations. Some of them will pay a little bit more, some of them pay a little bit less. Who sets the amount each country pays? The member states agree on what the percentage each country pays should be, based on a complex formula that includes the size of each country's economy and the size and the responsibilities of the country. You range from a high of 22% for the United States, which pays the most, to a low of 0.001% for the smallest countries. What happens if a country doesn't pay? If a country doesn't pay what it owes the UN for the equivalent of its past 2 years of debt, then it will lose its vote in the General Assembly. Countries try to avoid that, so a lot of them will try to make sure that however much they owe, it will be less than 2 years worth of debt. So, what is the money for? The Secretariat is the main body of the United Nations. It includes the staff who work on things ranging from diplomacy to human rights to the rule of law worldwide to all the humanitarian and peacekeeping work that we do. How does the UN prevent fraud and waste? The United Nations has many ways of having oversight over their money to make sure that none of it is wasted. And we do have internal and external auditors. There's groups inside the UN, like the Office of Internal Oversight Services, that investigates any allegations of fraud or corruption. But also, the main way of oversight ultimately is through the member states of the United Nations. They approve the budget and make sure that the expenses that the UN pays match up with our goals. What's the cost of humanitarian operations? Humanitarian relief falls into a few basic categories, but the main ones have to do with food, drinkable water, shelter, and different assets, whether it's mosquito nets in some countries or winterized clothing in others. In 2021, we asked for $3.77 billion to help 174 million people in 60 countries. That was crucial life-saving aid, and yet even so, we got basically a little bit less than half of that. We have to appeals where only 30% of our expenses are met, or only 20% of our expenses are met. It really depends. Some of the crises that get the most attention worldwide, we get all of the money we're asking for. But others, in countries that are less in the news daily, get much, much less. We don't see humanitarian aid as simply an expenditure. It's an investment in people. And ultimately, it's much less than the cost of giving up on people. How does this all fit in with UNICEF, the World Health Organization, and other entities? The United Nations also comprises a vast range of agencies, funds, and programs. They deal with all kinds of special issues, from the concerns of children, women, people with AIDS, with atomic energy, our postal transactions, civil aviation. So there's a wide variety of them, and each one has their own budget and their own board of directors. How does the cost of peace compare to the price of war? Certainly, there's trillions of dollars that are spent on the war machines of the world. UN peacekeepers, as many of them as there are, add up to 0.3% of the world's military expenditures. The other 99.7% comes from different member states. The war machines of the world build weapons that are used to kill people. The loss of human life deprives us all. We need to have a better way in life, and the United Nations, through its diplomatic work, its humanitarian work, its work on behalf of human rights, is trying to do what it can to establish a world where money can be spent for things that people really want. That is to say, a life of health, a life in which people are educated, a better life for all of them.